Welcome to Trial by Podcast. I'm Megan. I'm here with
Antara.
I'm Carissa.
And today we're discussing dupes or duplicate products. Now, dupes aren't a new thing, but they're definitely having a moment with TikTok. We see a lot of hauls, product comparisons, and with the cost of living, people are wanting the it product at an achievable price. So before we dive any further into this discussion, a big thank you to our IP principal, Gus, for giving some guidance on our discussion today.
Okay, so I think when we start, we need to probably jump into the legislation of trademark laws first because that's what kind of regulates dupes. So in the Trademarks Act 1995, Section 44, a trademark registration is actually to be rejected if it's substantially identical or deceptively similar to a trademark that is already registered by another person for similar goods or services. And so in the world of dupes, however, the deceptively similar provision doesn't really apply. So people who are buying dupes most of the time actually know that they're buying dupes. The whole point of the purchase is that consumers know that they're not getting the real product, but they're happy with the counterfeit product. And they are happy with the fact that it's cheaper, but it bears a resemblance to the real product.
Yeah, and I think raising a point you said, people are aware of what they're buying.
Yeah.
One thing I know we discussed with that is the whole point of dupes is that you're getting a trending product or a product that's luxe at a really achievable and a less price. And so you can't really be confused as to the product you're buying. You're not going to be getting a luxe product at 1/10 of the price. I think that price point, as you mentioned, really makes it clear that you are buying the dupe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this was actually raised in the Moroccan oil case. So in 2018, Moroccan Oil brought a case against Aldi. I'm sure a lot of us shop at Aldi, for using the words Moroccan argan oil in one of their products that they were selling. And Moroccan Oil claimed that these words were deceptive and misleading to the consumers that were buying the product, as the brand that Aldi was selling was not the true brand, obviously, and that this was infringing on their trademark. But when this was heard in the federal court, Moroccan Oil actually lost that case because the bench held, well, actually, it's not deceiving, exactly what Meg was saying. Customers who purchase these dupes know that they're getting a dupe. No one buys a super cheap version of the product from an everyday retail store expecting it to be same as the high-end product. And so I guess brands that want to protect their marks can't really use the argument that the dupes are deceiving, and this will fail in court as evidently customers are not being deceived. So it kind of brings the question of, I guess, what is the way to protect your branding in court? And that is to register pretty much every aspect of the product. And so we can see this with the brand of the Kinder Eggs. Did you guys ever eat the Kinder Eggs?
Oh, the little toy inside.
Yeah, with the toys
always.
inside. So they're the chocolate eggs that you must have loved. They have a little trinket inside it. But the brand Kinder has actually done really well with their trademarking because they have not only trademarked the name Kinder, they've trademarked how the name Kinder is presented on the branding. They've trademarked the shape of the egg as well as kind of the wave in the design. So all of that is trademarked. And so if someone tries to use a similar design, then they can immediately ask for an injunction. And so I guess that's kind of an example of how trademarking has been done well. And so dupes will likely fail in court if that
because
was
there's that extra layer of protection with the shape and design.
Yeah. And so similarly also like Zimmerman, the clothing brand.
Yeah.
I actually don't really own anything from Zimmerman. But I know that they've also pretty much trademarked every single one of their clothing design. And so if you look them up, the design is very protected, in the world of high-end fashion, where brands just kind of take the designs of others. This doesn't mean that the dupes won't be created, but it just means that they're a lot less likely to be able to get a remedy if they were to bring a case for it.
Jumping on the point on Zimmerman, if you think about all these luxury brands, the reason why they're doing so well is that they bring, these extra design protections to protect every single one of their designs. And that's why, dupes or other, kind of companies aren't getting away with copying those aesthetic elements. And I think that's something which, MCO has done really well because, you know, the original brand, Charlotte Tilbury, has kind of failed to do that. And, you know, that's what I'll go into with the actual MCO Beauty discussion. So MCO, for those who don't know, is the dupe brand, as we may say, which is duping the original brand of Charlotte Tilbury. And the reason why MCO has gotten away with its products imitating so many of the aesthetic elements of Charlotte Tilbury is because Charlotte has not actually trademarked their actual packaging. So the iconic golden packaging that we see, and that, you know, the line with like the diamond, that's actually not been trademarked and registered as a design. And those are the elements that MCO is actually taking in their dupe. You know, Charlotte Tilbury only has their name copyrighted, and MCO isn't going to steal their name. MCO is selling under MCO, you know, and that's why MCO has been able to get away with duping or using the similar packaging without, you know, facing any legal consequences. So if you use the, you know, example of the Hollywood Flawless filter, if you guys have used it from Charlotte Tilbury, I know I've used it. MCO has duped it with the Flawless Glow, but they haven't, you know, they haven't trademarked the Flawless name, and they haven't trademarked the packaging, which is why both products are able to exist.
Yeah, and I've used both products and they do seem similar, but ignoring the actual product itself, the packaging is very similar.
So similar.
But again, coming back to what you said earlier, I think Charlotte Tilbury, a bottle of their Hollywood Flawless filter, is retailing somewhere $70 to $80. MCO is potentially half the price of that.
Yeah.
You're not being deceived. But you're right, the packaging is very, very similar. But for those reasons that Charlotte Tilbury hasn't, you know, trademarked and protected all elements of that product. Only certain elements in the branding have been. So it allows MCO to come along, tweak a little bit here and there in terms of a few different little, I guess, details in the shape, but overall broadly really similar. And it allows them to retail that and be extremely successful. I know that's a really common product amongst a lot of my friends. And for the reason that it's half the price.
Yeah, I agree. Like every time I've bought a few MCO products, and I know that I'm buying it as MCO Beauty. I'm not being deceived thinking this is Charlotte Tilbury because of the fact that I'm paying significantly less. So when you have that knowledge as a consumer, you do kind of question, like, where does it go into with the ethical side of everything? But before we go into that, I'm just going to quickly go into this lawsuit that was actually brought against MCO in 2021 by the company ChemCorp Partners Limited. So this is brought in 2021 against MCO in the Fed court. So this was in relation to ChemCorp alleging that their eyelash and eyebrow dye kit was allegedly deceptive and misleading. So while this matter was settled outside the court and there wasn't a claim of misleading and deceptive conduct made, MCO did agree to stop offering to sell the eyelash and eyebrow dye kit using the same packaging and refrain from using the word 1,000 hours. I'm assuming the old product said 1,000 hours, like long-lasting eyelash kit.
Yeah.
So in that way, MCO did decide to stop selling the product in that way. So MCO has faced its fair share of, this is just one of the many legal claims that it has faced, but none of these lawsuits have actually kind of gone further because, again, they have been within the boundaries of like the principles of trademark.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably worth pointing out as well that like bringing a case in court is quite an expensive thing to do, and like litigation is very expensive. And so maybe like for brands like MCO, or like bigger brands where that MCO is ripping off, maybe it doesn't really feel like necessary if they're already a successful brand in themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess this just kind of goes into, as I mentioned earlier, the ethical question of it all. So why are dupes viewed to be in this grey area when considering ethical perspectives? Like, we know dupes are legal by definition, but I guess we can agree that the law is not necessarily viewed as ethical to everyone. You know, every consumer has a different view of what they consider to be ethical.
And I think from a consumer's point of view, who might not be as aware or across, you know, the legal detail and the legal boundaries, it it does seem a little bit
iffy.
Yeah, exactly. Where like I remember, to use Aldi as an example, when they first, and back to the Moroccan oil case, when they first started producing these goods, and you would go to Aldi and you could buy so many products that had bear so much similarity to products in Woolworths and Coles. And I remember being younger and being in Aldi and saying, how do they do that?
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
I was like, they're just, knocking off those products, but they're actually not. But you can see how that ethical grey area comes to be and raises questions in consumers' minds.
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of this tension between, fair competition and also consumer protection rights. If you think about, copying a popular brand's original product, but which is sold at a luxury point, and then you think in the perspective of that business owner, seeing that their brand is being imitated and then also being sold at a cheaper price, I can see why that they would feel that's unfair.
Yeah. But I guess like there's kind of the other side of that, which is like from the perspective of a consumer, just kind of like the average like person, the average middle class person, it kind of also makes sense to not buy something that's worth like hundreds and hundreds of dollars when these things are being sold at like, such a high price. And it does kind of seem better to just opt for like something that provides kind of the same function or like kind of even the same like standard.
And aesthetic elements.
Yeah, an aesthetic element, but at a much significantly lower price.
And I think that's also being driven, what we said at the start, that's being driven by TikTok, where you see, or social media, not just TikTok, where you see people with all these products, be it the original or be it the dupe. And we're kind of forced to feel like we need to have it, or you've got to have the next trending product, or whatever the piece of clothing is at that moment. So you want, but you might not be able to reach a crazy high price tag. And so you can see, I guess, the attractiveness of a dupe.
Yeah, and we can, if we go back to the other side of the argument, there is also that issue of innovation being potentially exploited. You think about these original brands, they're investing so much on the research, development on these luxe, expensive formulas and using cutting edge technology to, create these, high quality products. But, these dupes don't really bear those costs because they kind of already capitalize on some of the hard work of these original products, and as some way may say, just free ride on the original brand's investment. So again, there's that question of, is this fair, what a dupe is doing when they're not putting the same amount of effort as an original product is?
And I think that kind of comes back to the whole like underpinning of IP protection, IP law, is that it's there to promote innovation and creativity. And we're kind of left in a position where, you're right, dupes aren't really rewarding innovation and creativity. So is that an area where the IP law is kind of letting down a little bit on brands that are investing in innovation or are putting hard work into these designs? That takes a really long time, especially if you're a small creator. I see it a lot with like small fashion labels as well.
Starting from the bottom and putting so much time and effort.
And they're not being rewarded for their innovation creativity as kind of IP protection aims to do. So again, we're stuck in this kind of grey area of not giving that protection, but also needing to kind of have these achievable products. And I think one other thing that leads into, though, and again is a kind of counter argument to this all, is that are dupes in their own right a brand in itself? If they are not identical and there are tweaks, then it raises the question, well, is that a brand in itself? So then we're kind of left with another counter argument to it all. So it is a very grey area.
Yeah. And if you think of this in relation to MCO, obviously there's been no infringement raised in terms of trademark, right? Because they're within the legal boundaries. But there can be questions, brought about, okay, have MCO's registrations been made in good faith? So if you think about the original claim that I was talking about, if a registration is made in bad faith, an original business, so in this case, Charlotte Tilbury, could make a claim or cancellation action at the Fed court. But these cancellation actions are very, very expensive. And considering the popularity of MCO, now that they have a very stable consumer base, Charlotte Tilbury is probably thinking it's not worth going through all of that, you know?
Where do you think this leaves us with, I guess, dupes going into the future with things like AI, promotion, social media? Where do you think that leads us with dupes?
Yeah, I guess I would say I think like brands, especially business brands, definitely have to start considering like more thorough registrations of their brandings. Like it's definitely not enough to just register a name and a symbol, but like how something is completely packaged and presented aesthetically is important to trademark as well. And I think especially with AI coming in, like it's so easy to just copy things now. You could easily be like, oh, make this my own, like copy this but make this my own kind of thing, and AI will do it for you. And so I think there definitely needs to be a lot more awareness and a lot more consideration in terms of how businesses can protect their own marks and their own brands.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing in Australia also is that we don't have a tort of unfair competition. So you really do need to have those protections in place. And go as far as, say, Kinder did in shape, design, style,
every aspect
element
of the brand.
If you want that full protection from dupes. Otherwise, it's very clear that they can occur. Legally, there's not too much you can do about it if they do make those tweaks.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of brings us back to the idea that considering IP should be at the forefront of any brand and any design.
Yeah, and as you guys mentioned, with AI just, becoming much bigger in technology, like these issues are only going to increase more. These dupes are going to be so much more easier to make and quicker to make for these brands. This is something that it's only going to go downhill from here, sorry. More of these dupes. So I think brands just need to be really, really aware of taking that extra step of protection to maintain their integrity, or else legally, at least where the Australian law is right now with IP, there isn't much that they can do about it.
I think that's kind of an overview of dupes and the law in Australia at the moment. I'm sure we will continue to see many more dupes. I see them most nights on my TikTok scroll. But it is a really interesting topic, and I think it raises a lot of questions for a lot of consumers who might not be across the legal details. So we hope you've enjoyed our session today.
Thank you.